G'day folks, welcome to this week's episode of Learn to Paint TV. Rod Moore here from the Learn to Paint Academy. Excited to have you here for another little episode. This week we're going to do some hay bales in a field on a farm. I found this when I was visiting my sister in country Victoria, and I thought, oh, that's a nice little scene there. We've got these one feature hay bale there, and we've got a few supporting ones. Now, as always, we're going to use the Moore method of painting. The Moore method of painting is something I've taught to more than 30,000 students around the world, and it's all about simplifying the whole process down. If you're a beginner or an intermediate painter, how do you make it really simple? So the Moore method of painting is 3 steps, 3 colors, and 3 brushes, and we just follow along a very simple process which I'll explain to you. Okay, so just looking at the photo, we want to make sure we get our main hay bale in first, and to do that, or with all of our drawing, I'll just take a little bit of thinner. Now I'm using water mixable oils. If you want to use acrylic, that's perfectly fine, or traditional oils. Use the same colors basically, mix up the dark, and where I'm using a little bit of thinner here, you'll just add a little bit of water, okay? If you're using acrylic, or if you have a medium specifically for thinning the paint right down. We want that paint to be very loose like an ink, okay? We don't want the paint thick, so we're going to start out painting thinly in step 1 and 2, and then we'll get thicker as we progress. Now with that hay bale, well, first of all, let me just get in this horizon line so we know what we're sort of working with here. We've got this top of this mountain that's going to run down in sort of through there, and then we're going to have a horizon line which is running, well, it's not really the horizon line, but it's the bottom of that mountain range. So I'm downplaying the size of that mountain range, but that's one big shape. That's what I would call one big shape, is that hillside out the back. So we don't want to have the hay bale right on the center there. We want to have it slightly off center. Okay, so it's going to be, it's not a perfectly round face. Okay, and getting more of the side of it there. There, and then it's shadowed around about there, shadow in there like so, and it's a bit more that sort of shape. Okay, so now if you need to just play around with sketching that out first, I recommend that. You know, don't try and draw it in initially if you're not feeling confident. Just get a little sketchbook and have a practice sketching it. Okay, so this one we're only slightly seeing that face, which we'll put that in. It's got a little bit of shadow underneath it. There's one sitting in behind here, which I think is probably a good thing to get that in. Okay. Get that shadow in there. There's another one there. That's going to be too big. Probably could have used a slightly smaller brush for this drawing, but that's okay. Okay, now let's not overdo it. Let's just pop in those, what we got there, 4 in, okay? So then the rest of it is going to be these trees. So there's just off center on this side, we've got these big pine tree type arrangements here, okay? One sitting there, another one sitting around about there. Now I'm modifying the drawing. I'm not going to fit everything in, nor am I going to try, right? You don't need to put it all in, because nobody's going to take our painting down to the location and go, you know what, I think you missed a tree, right? Okay folks, well that's the end of step 1, our drawing, and as you can see our goal here was just to take these big shapes, right? We've got 4 of the big shapes there, and just pop them onto the canvas here. Now, looking at it from another angle, I notice I've got this one maybe not quite tall enough, so I can bring it down a little bit, and we'll make some adjustments as we go. But getting those big shapes in, the shapes of that distant hill, and then some of these tree shapes, right? That leaves our foreground, and our sky virtually paints itself, right? Those shapes appear by virtue of putting the other shapes in. That's step one of the Moore method of painting. Pretty simple. Let's go to step two. We'll get some colour blocked in here now, and that'll start to give us a better understanding of this painting and how it's going to work. So let's go back to the palette. So probably the most important thing here is that we key in the hay bales and get those right. So the one with the most colour and contrast and so on is going to be this main one. So let's just work on that. I want to get that shadow tone in, which is pretty much going to be this blue and red, right, that we've got up here. So we'll get that mix happening a little bit more. Put a touch of thinner into that. Okay, and in fact I'll pop my thinner container there so you can see when I dip into it. And then let's get some yellow ochre into this, right, because it's essentially a dark side of a hay bale. So let's make it have a hay-like effect, and we'll just make it the dark one. So it's a little touch on the green side, so we'll add a little bit of red into that. Okay, there's a bit of reflected light off of that as well. Let's just see how that looks. So it's sort of a darkish green. I want it to be a little bit yellower than that. But for the moment, I'll just put that in because I think that could be a tone that might work for us. But when I come back later on, what I want to do is really see if I can't improve that tone. Now, while we're doing the darks, I'll just come back to the other four. I don't want that to be the same dark as what we just mixed. So I'll take a little bit more blue into that mix. Mix it on the side, so it can go into the full mix there. A little touch of this white. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm lightening the value because they're all just that little bit further away, but I've also cooled it back a bit as well. Okay. And let's just get that one in. Now if I overpaint the size of the shape, that's okay, because when I come to add our field in, I can cut it back using the field colour. So don't be afraid to go over your lines. In fact, worst thing you can do is paint up to your lines like you're colouring in. Great artists didn't really colour in. So let's have that intention of at least trying to copy what the great artists have done. Okay, so that's good. That's working well. Now, the shadow tone in these trees out the back actually looks a bit darker. Before we do that, hang on 1 sec, it'd be remiss of me not to just get in a warmer dark. So I'm putting our red and our yellow together, right, with a touch of blue. There's a warmer dark, get some thinner into that. We don't want that too thick, that paint. And then let's just mass in just a bit of dry brackeny bush in that corner, just as a stopper for the eye. We don't want the eye to sort of run up there and then sort of out. So it's a little bit of a stopper for the eye. It's not well, if you look, I took half a dozen photos of this scene, and some of the other photos where we come a bit further that way to the right, they do have a whole lot of grasses and things there. So, all right, now let's go for a tone for those back trees. So we've got the blue there, and we want a dark green tone, right? So we're going to need a little bit of red into that, a little bit of blue. Okay, and look, for some of them that probably works well. Those trees that look like they're pine trees like these, well, I'm not going to try and distinguish what type of tree they are. I'm just going to treat the trees as just masses of colour, right? Dark and light. Now, I've made my trees a fair bit bigger than what they are relative to in the photo, right? So just be aware of that. So I've changed it up a little bit just to try and make it a more interesting painting. Now don't do this neat. Trees have a habit of not appearing that neat, right? So don't try and paint it, or don't feel like you need to paint it super neat, because it just ends in heartache often, doesn't it? My tree doesn't look right. It's often because we've tried too hard to paint a tree rather than just, you know, really what are they? They're just masses of dark and light. Okay, going a little bit yellower on that one. So there's a bit of variety there, right? Darkest one, a little bit lighter there and there, and this one's a little bit warmer. These are a little yellower. So that's all looking good. And because it is further away, it's going to be a little bit desaturated in colour. So a little touch of that third primary, see on the brush there, the blue. Okay, pop that to one side, and then we'll just mix a little bit of that in, just to grey it back a bit. Okay. And again, because we're doing our blocking, we want it to be fairly thin, that paint. So then we can come in here and we can just do a test. Is that light enough compared to what we've already got up there? Looks like it is. Might just warm it up just ever so slightly. Okay. And then so let's just work around our little trees here. Okay, if you smudge it up a little bit, that's okay. Because remember that we're just blocking in here, we can always come back over this. Again, don't be caught by that line. We're not here to colour in up to our lines. Okay, I'm picking up a fair bit of that dark tone underneath, but it's actually muting the hill colour, which I think will work to our advantage when we put some highlights on these trees. And again, if it's too dirty looking, when we come to do step 3, I can just get a fresher look in that paint there. So now we want to get in our general field colour in here to here. It's going to be lighter at the back, and it's going to get warmer and darker in value as it comes forward. I'm going to pop just a tiny little touch of this phthalo green there, like it's just some of the dry area there. And it should be lighter than there, down at the base here, because it's getting more direct sunlight. Okay, I've got that paint fairly thin here. Just want to make sure you are aware of that. It's, might just thicken it up a little bit actually, because it's a little touch thin. Okay, so just got to take your time as you work around these hay bales. Notice I changed the angle of the brush just to make sure that I can get right up next to them. Okay, so now I need to start just bringing that tone a little bit darker a little bit warmer. Just as we come forward here, got to be careful not to have too hard a transition, so I'll just pop some of that tone up back a little bit there. Now if it's really wet in there, which it is fairly wet, and you're worried about sort of dragging that dark out, you don't have to go right up to it, because we can paint back over that missing sort of spot there, the gap, when we do step 3. And by then it'll have a chance to dry off a bit. Okay, so now that I've got to there, I'm going to grab a big brush and just get that colour in for the rest of it. So just a big 1-inch brush roughly. Get some more white, some more yellow ochre. Whoop, that's a bit too much of that. Okay, which just enable me to get it in a bit quicker. And keep that paint thin. So by having it darker and warmer in the foreground, we should create a nice gradient. So the last step of our blocking is going to be getting our sky in. So the sky is a fairly flat blue, so that's how we'll paint it. We won't muck around with that because it's not really a feature of the painting at all. There's nothing happening in it. So I'll just get a big chunk of the white, and we'll get some of the blue. Possibly a touch, so let's just get a little bit more white into it. Now I'm using a big brush. I just need to take a little bit of care as I come down around those trees. I'm just not going to try and blend it in just yet. I just want to paint down to those other elements. Just a small one with soft hairs. And we're just going to very gently just blend those two together so that they look like they're all part of the same sky. Alright folks, well that brings us to the end of step 2, our blocking, and as you can see it's a fairly simple process, just got to work our way through setting up our value structure, getting the right darks and lights in here, and already this painting's starting to come together and is working well. What I do now usually is I just have a break and I'll let this painting settle down. I want the thinner to dry out, or if you've been using water with acrylics, you want your acrylics to be fully dry, right? You don't want to be working back into it. With oils, it can be tacky. It doesn't have to be fully dry, but having a break for half an hour to an hour is a good idea to let it just dry off a bit and set properly, and then we can come in and start working into the areas a bit more easily. What we need to do is come in and put our lighter tones on our hay bales, some highlight sort of light tones on our trees, a couple of tiny little details into the field, and maybe a little bit of that road, and a hint of a farmhouse popping in through the back there, and then we'll be done. Right, so this painting's coming together quite nicely, and let's have a break, and I'll see you after the break for step 3 of the Moore method of painting. Cheers. Okay, welcome back, friends. Well, I left this overnight. It's dried off and settled down quite nicely. So we're now going to do step 3 of the Moore method of painting. And this is where we start to then bring this to life, get some more details and highlights, gets a little bit of, the lighter side of the trees, a little bit of detail into the field, and obviously bring up the hay bales to a certain level. And there's probably not a lot for us to do here, but we'll take our time and we'll just work through it. We'll start off with these hay bales here and make sure we get those just right first. Alrighty, so let me get underway. Okay, so I think the first thing for us to tackle is going to be that main hay bale, which is really a star of our show there. So we want to get the right tone in for that. Now notice that I've painted the field in a fairly yellow ochre-y sort of hay bale colour, right? So I need to try and figure out a way here that we can just punch up the colours a bit, make it so that it stands out, otherwise it's going to blend into the field here, right? So I think what we need is a warmer tone on the face of the hay bale there. Okay, I'll just get a few different tones. I'm using the yellow ochre, the cadmium red, the alizarin crimson, the cadmium yellow light, and the yellow ochre here, just to get a few different shifts in tone. Okay, and let's just start off with this sort of warmer, darker tone here. I'll dip into some of my oil. And if you're using acrylics, then just use water will be fine, just to loosen it up. Okay, and we just start to build this up. So here we need to just be careful that we get the shape as accurate as we can. Now I've done that fairly thin paint there. When we'll work back into it, I'm going to get some yellow ochre and some of this white, and that spot on the top there is really quite light here. In there. Okay, so we get that light side and we've got the dark side. However, that dark side now, we just need to shift it away from being that tone of dark. So I think the value's right, because you can see the contrast there, making it look, like it's standing up. But what we need to do is just mix up a dark, our blue and our red, okay, and introduce it into some yellow ochre here, and get it away from that sort of almost chromatic black feel that's there. So let's just try this. Okay, it's going to be something like this, and get that roundness of the bale is important. So the direction of the brush is particularly important with this type of subject, and I'll just soften those edges in a little bit there. Okay, and you can see that we're just building this up bit by bit. I need to come in here with some thicker paint. Got a little bit too much thinner out before, so let's see if we can't just strengthen this up a little. We might have to let that dry off a bit. That's okay too. Okay, as it comes down in here, it definitely gets darker. Down along that base there. Just get that shadow in just a little bit more there. So it's a very subtle little shift that I just painted in there. You may or may not see it, but it's definitely there. Get some even lighter value of, you know, almost pure white just into the top section of it there. To come in here and get these ones. Like so. Okay. Slightly, this needs to be slightly darker on this face than what on the top is, because the top's catching directly the light. That's a bit closer to what we want. Angle's almost right, but not 100% right. So that's okay. What we can do is come in and get some of these field colours in and around it. The edge there. So I already had a bit of green in the brush, so I don't need to mix it back in too much. Okay, so this one's just catching that light through there like so. And then there's this one here, which is also catching a nice bit of light. More muted version of the green there, and just work up some lighter tones into this tree. Okay, then I can do a darker green just to work into the rest of it there. Okay, a slightly lighter version around the back here. Here and there, and that's really, we don't need too much more than that. Now, you know, if you wanted to do tree portraits, obviously you'd spend more time detailing these up, but that's not really what we're looking to do with this particular painting. So, you know, details aren't necessarily the thing that's going to make people look at it and go, oh, that's a tree, right? It's often just shapes and tone and colour. So I don't need to paint every leaf in here. Not too detailed up, I personally think, and everyone's got a different opinion on the level of detail, but I'm not really one for realism type painting. I'm more interested in creating an impression of it. See if we can find a tone for that. Add along here. And there's probably a few that come down the hill there. Keep that value quite light. We don't want it to compete with what we're already doing. Okay. I'm just looking at the back. I think I need to create a little bit more contrast to the back of those hay bales there. So I'm going to introduce a little bit of green into the mix. It's a phthalo green. I could have just mixed the green with blue and yellow and then brought that in, but just for time's sake, let's just run a little bit of that back in through there. Can't just pop it there though, so we need to introduce it in a few more places than that. So it's mostly a dry field. However, a few little patches of green grass in there, which there is in the photo. And I think perhaps we just need to punch up the highlight on the back of the hay bales. Some pure white, some cadmium yellow, and some yellow ochre. It needs a lot more white. Okay, so I just need to come in and do this carefully. See how I've loaded the brush up on there? Where are we there? I've spent a bit of time darkening out the back of these hay bales, so this should definitely stand out more now. Okay, they're starting to work a bit better, aren't they? Getting that contrast in right, I think that's the key. All right, let's take the tape off. One of the things I used to always love about watercolour, watching DVDs of watercolour artists when I was painting in watercolour a bit more, was this part, when the tape had come off, and it'd always be like, wow, just the fact that it has that little frame around it just makes it look so much more like a real painting. So you can do that with the canvas. Make sure we get that corner staying on. There we go. And there you go, folks. There's our little hay bales in Malmsbury. So there you go, folks. Hay bales in Malmsbury, a simple little landscape painting done in a fairly simple process. I've painted it very high key compared to how it actually is. My field colour in hindsight is probably a lot lighter than what the field colour is here. And that was something that just happened. I didn't make a conscious decision to do that. I was probably just not paying enough attention when I was painting my field colour in. And that meant I had to push the lights a bit more on the hay bales to make them stand out a bit. But it still worked at the end of the day. You can see the hay bales there. And it's a nice little painting, a really simple little one, easy to have a go at. So please have a go at this one and let us know how you go. So if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you check out all the other episodes of Learn to Paint TV. And if you haven't done so already, please register for our free course. There's the link on the screen there. Go to www.learntopaint.info and you can register for a free course there, which goes into the more method of painting in more detail. And there's 4 different painting projects for you to have a go at. Okay, all you need to do is just register your details at learntopaint.info. And that'll take you to the Learn to Paint Academy, and I'll see you over there. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Learn to Paint TV, and I'll see you next week on Learn to Paint TV. Cheers for now.